Welcome to episode 104 of your favorite or second favorite optimization podcast. My guest today was with us for episode 49, so he's a repeat guest, repeat offender, homie of the podcast. Shiva Manjunath, welcome back to No Hack Show. Such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me. And you did nail it. This is the second best experimentation podcast out there because the first one is the podcast that I co-host from A to B.
We will have that argument over the next 30 minutes.
It's not an argument. It's won. I've already won.
You did. I'm pivoting. Okay.
No, you should be comfortable. Silver medal's nothing to ignore, man. Silver's pretty good.
2 out of 2? Second out of 2?
There's a bigger sample size than that, to be fair.
I know. No, but since we last talked in January 22, a lot of things have changed. Obviously, you and Tracy have the amazing From A to B podcast, and I strongly recommend everyone to subscribe, listen to the podcast. Follow their LinkedIn page. Are you posting the clips anywhere else? Because those short clips are really fun to watch. You have great chemistry there.
We have plans for expansion. We are a 2-person team, so we're trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. But yes, there are aggressive plans for expansion and probably YouTube and some other channels. But yeah.
That's awesome. Looking forward to that. And yes, everyone, the link will be in the description. If you follow me, you follow Shiva on LinkedIn. So you probably heard of the podcast and you probably agree with me. It's the second best optimization podcast in the world. Before we start, another friend of the podcast, Luca, my homie from my hometown in Serbia, town of Niš, has a question for you. Okay. Literally this. And he's serious. How do you care about experimentation so much? Like, really, how do you ever dream of A/B tests, have nightmares about tests not backed with data, or both?
It's a blessing and a curse. Because it's a blessing because I think people feed off my passion for testing and learning, and it gets people excited to feed off my excitement. Like, for me, I love going to concerts because I feed off the energy of everyone else, and that makes me feel that energy, and I just absorb it through osmosis. So that's what I hope to capture a little bit of doing the podcast with Tracy, is just sharing that excitement, get people interested. And why am I this way? I don't know. I get pretty fixated and passionate about certain things. And I think it's just like ADHD. I just get super hyper focused in really specific things. Like, I love hockey. I have sleeves. I have hockey behind me. Like, hockey's another one of those super hyper focused things. Music. I have half a sleeve of music. So I get fixated on random shit. And I don't know if I could swear, but
you can. We are a family-friendly podcast. We're the best family-friendly optimization podcast out there.
Except for Shiva. Except when Shiva's on.
Yeah, but it's just 2 episodes. Okay. I think ADHD is an optimization superpower because you really need to be obsessed with finding all the shit out there that's not right.
It's a blessing and a curse. Yeah. It's a blessing because it almost forces you to have to always consider looking at tests, uncovering every rock. You have to have morbid curiosity towards everything that happens so that you have full confidence in decision making. But on the flip side, dude, when I was early on in my career without the focus and guardrails of what to focus on, what to have diminishing returns on and say move on to the next thing, I'd spend days in heat maps. Days. And session recordings. Actually, mostly session recordings. And you're just watching and you're like, this is so cool. And you take a look at the end of the day. What did I learn? I don't know if I learned anything, but it was fun doing this.
But you learned that you like to watch session recordings and heat maps like that. That's something.
Yeah.
Tell me about From A to B. How did that come to be? Okay.
That was not from A to B?
Yeah, that was not planned.
How did we get from A to B?
Yes,
from A to B.
Yes. Tell me about the history of the podcast. When did you start? All that.
It started with basically me taking a look at the whole space. And I'm not throwing any shade towards you or your podcast. I just say in general, LinkedIn is boring as hell, man. There's a lot of just dry, boring things. When I say LinkedIn, I mean experimentation LinkedIn. Okay. It's a lot of papers. It's a lot of p-values. And experimentation is such an exciting thing. For me, I'm so interested and motivated in it. And to just watch 2 people with a crappy Zoom recording that cuts out, people are interrupting each other, no flow. I'm like, of course people are not interested in this. And when they're talking about p-values for 40 minutes and it's people arguing about frequentist versus Bayesian, I saw the landscape and I'm like, of course, people are not interested in this. Yep. I would not be interested in this if I was not already interested in this. I was like, there's an opportunity for experimentation content to be delivered in a more entertaining way. And that's where I was like, you know me, I post a bunch of memes. To me, that's a way to get people interested in experimentation. Yep. Simplify it, make it fun, make it interesting. I was like, how can I use that avenue and do something podcast related? And I said, well, if I just talk to people for an hour, no one would listen. I might be interesting for maybe 10 minutes, but I hate solo podcasts. If I wouldn't listen to my own podcast, which I do, I would never make anyone else do it. So I was like, who is dope in the experimentation space that I know I have good chemistry with? And Tracy was the obvious only choice for me to have on the podcast. I think our chemistry speaks for itself. She's such a dope person. We agree on a lot, but we do disagree on some things that creates an interesting dynamic. We have different personalities and POVs. So for me, for all those reasons, I'm like, I know I can make an interesting experimentation podcast. And our audience is hopefully digital marketers and experimentation people. Collectively, it's more targeted towards experimentation. But ideally, it lowers the bar and makes experimentation interesting along the board. So people are like, oh, okay, I get what they're saying. I understand what they're saying. This is cool. Let's do more of this. And that was the genesis of starting all of that.
You knew Tracy from before?
I've had conversations with her. It's funny. I've actually never met her before. I'm going to meet her for the first in person. Yeah. I'm going to meet her for the first time in 3 days at CXL Live.
The chemistry is off the hook, especially even if you had known each other before. The chemistry is amazing. Okay, this just puts it to another level. 100%. Yeah, the conversations you have, like the back and forth, high energy for the entire episode, like that's very difficult with most topics, unless it's politics or I don't know what. True. Unless it's Fox News. You guys are killing it in that department, like really enjoyable to listen and easy to listen. Like it's very easy to stay tuned and not get bored, because for me, a podcast used to be, before I started doing this, something that I listen to while I run, and then 2 kilometers in, I just tune out. And they're just talking, and it's just noise. Half boring. I don't even hear it at that point. You guys are not that. Like, you guys are the opposite of that in a very good way. So congrats on that. That is not easy at all. And
coming from you, it truly means a lot, because your podcast has been something that I've listened to quite a bit, and you are just such a natural when it comes to this. This isn't supposed to be just like let's just tell each other how cool we are, but that does come from the heart. I had a bad day yesterday, and Shiva is just volunteering. I'll give you the words of affirmation, bro. You're a good person. That when you reached out to me saying, let's do a podcast, I was like, yeah, like tomorrow, because I'll make it work.
The first episode was fun. I remember that episode still. Yeah. And yeah, I'm very glad that we're in touch and like we're in the same space now, but not completely the same space. I'm not experimentation. I'm not all out in experimentation. I'm more about optimization and just making shit better any way you can. Yep. We're not competing. Like we're homies. Like you said, like, the fact that this is the best one and you're the second best only makes it more fun.
Oh, we're joking about it, right? But of course why? It doesn't have to be a competition. I'll shout out 2 other people who have a dope podcast. Treachery of Data from Matt Bieshel and Iqbal Ali. Two dope human beings who I've been on their podcast. And like, they're just good people. And there's no competition. I don't need to compete. You listen to us because you want to hear our POV. I want to listen to your show because I want to hear your POV. If we see it as a competition where I need to be better than you, that's just toxic.
Dude, that's just... I doubt anyone in this space would look at it that way, or even close to that.
Right. My only competition's ourselves. We just want to be ourselves.
There you go. Do you ever look at your first episode, like first few, and think, oh my God, what were we doing?
We didn't publish our first episode, meaning we recorded like 3 before we're like, all right, we're figuring out a groove. And it's interesting you bring this up, because I know the topic's experimentation, like building and experimentation programs and the parallels of creating a podcast. My first test ever was like just the worst. I've learned so many things since then, but it was a bad test. I didn't randomize traffic properly. The audiences were weird. I let it run for 2 days and I'm like, the tool told me it won, so it won. And for all those reasons, it was not good. In the same way, our first episode was not great, but we took every episode, everything that we do, we take it as an opportunity to figure out what can we do to improve the product? And we're using research. We get feedback, positive and negative, from people we know and people we don't, to optimize our podcast. Tracy's been laser focused on optimizing the process of recording, of SOPs, while I'm like laser focused in on learning how to edit video, how to edit audio, how to publish. So like we're optimizing our optimization podcast using data and inputs. And it's funny because there's a lot of parallels with that.
Yeah, you mentioned preparing for this. Like we can talk about parallels between building and scaling optimization, experimentation programs and building a podcast. Like since you started doing this, what is your biggest surprise like in how podcasts are made? Like, what was the unexpected thing you ran into?
You can't just, for us at least, we can't just turn the mic on and talk for 30 minutes because a lot of the good podcasts have preparation behind it. It makes it seem like they're just turning it on and then recording, but that's not the reality.
Hell no.
There's a lot of preparation. And I'll pull it back to experimentation. You don't just test stuff and then it just wins or loses and you just move on and you have a successful program. There's a lot of research and data and analysis and bickering about what button shape the thing should be and what colors and blah, 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 until you get to a point of actually running the test. And then you run the test and then that's not even the finish line. Like something might happen during the test. So it's a lot harder than it looks. And there's a lot of preparation that goes into every single recording that we do. And it's funny, we have our own prioritization like framework of ranking topics, like what's interesting to people, what's not, how much data do we have, like how interesting is this? Is this something that people are talking a lot or not a lot about on LinkedIn? Is this something we feel we could do 20, 25 minutes on or not really? There's a lot of pre-episode prep that goes into each episode. That's
pretty cool.
Yeah.
For me, it's just booking and scheduling. Like that you don't have guests. So that's the difference. Like for me, there's a guest in every episode. Sometimes it's not easy. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it just like this one, like want to talk on Friday, let's talk on Friday. But sometimes that takes a lot of time. And especially like right now, I'm doing the partnership with Experimentation Elite and talking to a lot of their speakers. And I booked, I think, 8 to 10 episodes within a few days. And just my calendar tab is open all the time, just checking not to overlap, not to mess something up. So from A to B, like what's going to happen in the next year, 2 years? Like what's your dream or vision with the podcast?
I think we're trying to figure out a little bit of like, how do we increase our reach and audience? We want to try and help as many people as we can. That's our mission statement. It's not teach. We're not in the business to make money here. We're doing this because we do care and we want to help people as much as we can. So what can we do to broaden our reach to continue to help people? Tracy's been the de facto community manager, reaching out to everyone who follows us and creating these connections, just so we have a more personalized connection. We're trying to build our own little community of from A to B homies that listen to our podcast, give us feedback, talk to us. We want to create this, I want to say inclusive, no stupid questions. We want to create a community that fosters this. I think a lot of times in experimentation, there's a lot of gatekeepiness. And it's you listen to the one smartest person in the room or someone who's done X, Y, and Z, when instead there's so many people who have important voices that aren't always elevated. And that's why like I love Romeo Santiago's mission statement at Experiment Nation too, right? Like it's elevate diversity. Let's elevate voices who maybe the LinkedIn algorithm's screwing over their reach. There's so many people who I see, I'm like, this is such a dope post. And it's 4 likes. And I'm like, how? How does A/B testing good go viral? And this dude who lays out a clear framework of how to A/B test and things you should follow get like 4 likes and 1 comment. And that comment's me saying, this is a dope post, so I'm going to repost this.
So where is the community right now?
The community is just on LinkedIn right now.
Just LinkedIn, okay.
Yeah. I think we're still trying to optimize our own processes to be able to kick out 1 episode a week and potentially have certain guests on that can, there's some technology things we're figuring out on our side. But yeah, a lot of stuff is we're just learning how to podcast, what we want to do, how can we help. And we have some internal discussions on where we want to take it that I don't want to make public entirely yet at this moment. But our goal is to just help. And the amount of love we've gotten from people who are like, man, I don't know who you guys are, but I appreciate you guys for talking through these things.
Wow.
It's cool. It's just my mom will text me all the time. Can't wait till 8 p.m. for the new episode. I'm like, all right, Mom, I appreciate you, but you're always going to say nice things. But it's the random people who reach out to you. And so I have no idea who you are, and you have no incentive to send me nice things. And the fact that you're sending it is like, I think we're onto something here. I think people
that is a very good feeling to have. Yeah. I remember like the first message I got about the podcast. I think it was Luca, who I mentioned earlier in the podcast. Who's this guy? Like, why is he even listening? What the hell? And then you get more and more feedback, and it's people that the craziest thing, like us talking, you and I talking, like we would have never met if it wasn't for this shit. It is absolutely incredible. So yeah,
it's something that I love what Tracy's doing with the podcast too, which is like talking to people, reaching out and saying, hey, let's have a conversation. It's its own version of networking, but also it's just like having a conversation with someone is so helpful for both people. It's cool to be able to meet like-minded individuals and talk about problems, talk about challenges. I'm not trying to plug CXL, but like I'm stoked for CXL next week for that same reason. You get to meet people in person. Pep does a really good job of fostering the groups. So you're going to be talking with people who share similar problems and are in similar, situations as you. And you get to just have these conversations and either spend however much time complaining about the problems and sympathizing together. And you're like, all right, I'm not alone. Or you're like, that's interesting that you're doing this. I've tried this. Have you tried this? And it unlocks some pretty cool stuff.
The thing is, if you're not speaking up publicly, you will not be able to help others, and you will not be able to get help from others that you don't know.
A lot of times people get swatted on LinkedIn for speaking up. I'm having a challenge with this, and it's who are just like, you're doing it wrong. Blah, 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 blah. Dude, shut up. Let's
be
nice
are you
here.
On? Like my LinkedIn is all flowers and friendliness. What is? I know a lot of
maybe I just attract negative attention.
Maybe your algorithm is completely messed up. I mean, I know that one of my favorite subreddits is LinkedIn Lunatics, and this is the second plug it's getting on this podcast because it is just insanity.
You haven't seen me on there yet, right?
No, nothing from experimentation at all. I saw one person that I'm not going to name that I know, but that's it. Not from experimentation space.
Okay.
It's the funniest, coolest subreddit out there. It is amazing.
I don't know if cool is the right word. Depressing?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. It's LinkedIn Lunatics. It's not, you know what to expect. Yeah. You mentioned CXL. This is coming out on Wednesday, so the event is CXL Live next Tuesday. Could you just tell me? I want to hear about that because I've never been. Tell me about that event. Why is it so special?
For me, what I love about it is there are some conferences I've been to that are just so sales pitchy. I'm not going to name the conferences, but there are some conferences
they know who they are.
Yeah. It's just a sales pitch. It's not even like a timeshare because you don't get anything for it. You have to pay a lot of money to go to the conference and be there and then be sold all the new things that are happening. And then vendors are harassing you to sign up for them. This is not that. It is, I like the idea of it being more of a networking event and conversations happening organically, with some structure towards some talks to juice the brain up a little bit, rather than hear someone smart say something that you might not ever be able to do for an hour. And you're sitting there yawning. All right, this conference room's kind of cold. This guy's talking about running 2,000 tests a month. I can't get resourcing for 5. This is not helpful to me. Instead, it's like you get to talk with people who are in similar situations as you, and talk to them, and then you create these connections that do last for a long time. Like the people I meet at CXL, I'm regularly interacting with on LinkedIn. And me, it's the value of the connections. And I could DM that person, say, hey, dude, remember we talked at CXL? And then we have a conversation, and there's a lot of power in people connections. And I think that a lot of ChatGPT, and we're moving away from actual human connections.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to go into a spot with like-minded people and just have these human connections.
Oh, definitely. Especially since, as you mentioned, this is only live. There's no online version of this. So this is strictly for in-person networking, and there's a special element to that. It's US only. There's no CXL European events.
I think they're working on it. There might be something Estonian based.
They had I forgot the name, but there was a camp I cannot remember. Elite.
I don't remember either.
I don't remember what it was, but sometime in June. Okay, that's cool. What else did I want to ask? Are you taking guests? Do you plan on taking guests on the podcast ever?
It's a challenge. I think for us, we want the vibe to be what the vibe is. We want to make sure we pick people who can have conversations like we have. I need it to be interesting. I have a squirrel brain. You're going to lose my attention if you go 3 layers deep into p-values. So that's my brain. But I want to make sure. I also want it to be entry appropriate for other folks to jump into experimentation. Okay. I want it to be that digital marketers can listen to this podcast and say, oh, I didn't understand anything about this particular thing in experimentation. So I could take a quick listen for 20 minutes. It's fun. Even if I don't learn the exact thing I wanted to learn about, it was fun for me for 25 minutes to take a listen to this. And there's some stuff we do on like LinkedIn posts of the week where we find people's voices who are not amplified. And we say, this is a really cool thing that a really cool person said. Y'all should check this person out. And that's what we're trying to do a little bit with the community as well.
That you mentioned LinkedIn, I remembered the passive aggressive Fridays. You're special on LinkedIn. Happy Friday.
Is it passive aggressive?
Come on. Happy Friday to everyone except, what is it? How do you call that?
Passive aggressive?
To those who don't know.
Way, but you're right.
Someone told me, have you seen Shiva's passive aggressive Fridays? And that's the only way I call them.
If Tracy told you that, we need to have a talk.
I'm not saying it was her or it wasn't her. I'm not going to tell you that. No, but they're funny. The posts are funny. How did that happen? You used to be the king of CRO memes. That was...
used to be?
You used to be only the king of CRO
Thank
memes.
you. Thank you.
Sorry, man. You still are.
Respect,
come on.
Bro.
You still are. I know. But the Friday thing.
It's one of those things that I just did it a couple times. I was just this is just funny to me. So I just did it.
How do you come up with them? In bulk and then just post them, or wake up Friday morning and come up with something?
So my writing process is probably different than others, where I'll just have brain thoughts as a super smart way of saying I use my brain sometimes. And I'll have a thought and I'll have my notes pad, my notepad on my phone is just filled with random things. And then when I'm like, let me go back to that. And then I will go back and be like, this sucks. This is stupid. Or I'm like, this is a cool thought. Let me flesh this out a little bit more. And then sometimes I'll be like, I don't want to post this one. I have another post that's more baked. I want to post that. But if I could say this to anyone who is considering to start posting on LinkedIn, just start writing. It's the hardest thing to just start writing. And I promise you, as toxic as LinkedIn might be for certain people who might have strong opinions and be kind of...
It's your algorithm.
Fair enough. But assuming that if that's a fear that you have, I'd say most people are not on LinkedIn to just dunk on you. And just write cool stuff. There's so many friends I have who have conversations like this with them. And I'm like, you should write about that on LinkedIn. They're like, And I get it. It's one of those things you should go to the gym. And you're like, yeah, I should. But it's tough to go to the gym. But the first time is the hardest. And it's okay if you don't spend an hour there. But the first time's the hardest. Second time will be better. Third time will be even better. Just keep on writing. I recommend everyone post because...
I couldn't agree more. Especially people who actually have done something and have something to say. And that's the majority, the silent majority that just sits down, do their work. There's a lot of
people
there's
have
a lot
things
of
to say, bro.
Honestly,
a lot. Everyone that's in experimentation has something to say.
That's fair. Absolutely. Yep. That's definitely true. People should follow you. I'll put the link in your description. People need to follow you on LinkedIn if they don't already.
Appreciate that.
And on that note, I'll just say happy Friday to everyone except for the people who are not subscribed to this and Shiva's podcast. Shiva, thank you for being in this episode. It was a pleasure to talk to you. It always is. And to everyone listening, please consider rating, reviewing, sharing the episode, and subscribe to From A to B podcast. And I will talk to you next week.
Thanks, y'all.